Yes. Hello, my beautiful friends. It is an amazing day. Very glad that you are here and with us. It is going to be a great stream. We've got some wild stories that we've pulled up here that we're going to run through. We got some official court documents. We've got a new threatening letter, and we've got Merrick Garland, our U.S. Attorney General, who is now out lecturing us all about our conversations regarding the DOJ. If we say that the DOJ is a biased, partisan, weaponized group of hack prosecutors, well, he doesn't like that too much. So we're going to say it louder and louder and louder as the days go by. But it's a beautiful day, my friends, and we're excited that you're here. We're here a little bit early on the day because we're heading out of town. You'll see us here tomorrow, but we'll be in another location. And we're excited to be able to attend to these stories with you before we jet. But we're going to go through, I'll give you a quick summary on what we're talking about today. Then we'll get into the meat and potatoes. And of course, the big story out is that they're now admitting that there is some widespread problems with our U.S. mail system all across the entire country. We'll read through this, see what they have for us. But this is part of a pattern that I just want to draw to our attention, that the feds are now fortifying the election. Okay, everywhere we turn, they are working to make sure that their grip on power is not loosened a bit. So you can see the Washington Post is saying they're also now suddenly increasing security for January 6th. Oh, that's nice. Would have been nice if they did that 4 years ago when Trump demanded it and they didn't do it. We've got a letter from Nancy Mace that looks like this. She's questioning the censorship that's currently happening from the Biden administration. And you will not believe it, but we've got an update on Trump's gag order as well. So very, very short opinion here. Came out from the Supreme Court of New York, or the Court of Appeals in New York, which is the Supreme Court. And it looks like there will not be a Trump appeal moving forward. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the rejection of the gag order appeal, which we just mentioned. We've got Alina Habba coming up. And then we've got an interesting letter from Marc Elias. So this is Marc Elias, the Elias Law Group. Same guy who was very instrumental in 2020 in my opinion, rigging the election. He would say it's probably just focused on election integrity. But we had concerns because in our opinion, what was happening is they were manipulating the election rules on the back of COVID. And so he's back in the fray again. He was kind of on the outs with Biden. He's back in the fray. And so we'll read through this letter. He's going after a pretty important state, not normally a swing state, but Trump might be making a play for it this year. So we'll talk about it. And then there's more lawfare happening. There's a sleeper case that we'll talk about that's trying to stop Trump. Nobody's really mentioning this one, but it's trying to stop the RNC as well from intimidating voters, whatever that means, which means, I guess, having people who don't have citizenship, avoiding them voting at the polls. Is that threatening and intimidating? Okay, so we'll talk about that. Then we've got Attorney General Merrick Garland was out today. And he came and he gave this little speech, and I read some of the excerpts on what we were expecting him to say, but it sounds like he was just lecturing us, right? You cannot talk badly about the DOJ. You cannot say that they are partisan hacks who have wrecked justice in America, shattered 234 years of American historical precedent in order to attack their political opponents. You can't say that. Of course, we will. So we'll listen to what Merrick Garland says. We'll make fun of him because, you know, he's never going to be on the Supreme Court. Oh, man, it must stink for him because that's really all he wanted. He's been resigned to becoming a partisan hack. Not a big surprise. But we'll get into all of it, my friends. It's an incredible Thursday. I hope your week is unfolding nicely. I hope you're accomplishing all the things you've set your mind to. Email inboxes are starting to look empty, though I need to do that myself. And you're having a lot of fun. You know what tomorrow is? If today's Thursday, pretty sure that means tomorrow is Friday. We're excited about that. We will be back here tomorrow, of course, to see you then. And we appreciate you subscribing wherever it is you're watching this. Thanks for following us, following along, liking this video so that we don't miss you when we go live back here tomorrow. Now, before we get into any of this business on the day, We, of course, have to be prepared with our friends at the Wellness Company because, as you know, we're seeing a surge of new health crises all over the place, assassination attempts. We've got new alerts about pandemics, monkeypox, bird flu. There's a summit coming up. Now, it's clear. It seems like they're setting the stage for another pandemic or whatever they want to do to get control of us. They're not just coincidences. We have to ask ourselves, are we prepared as we were for the last pandemic? Hopefully we're much more. 48% of Americans, according to the National Center for Disaster Preparedness, don't have any emergency supplies ready. So we saw how this went down the last time. We don't want it to happen again. And so you can get the Contagion Medical Emergency Kit from the Wellness Company. It's got a bunch of good stuff in there. It's got Tamiflu, budesonide, Z-Pak, nebulizers. You're not going to have to wait in line at the doctor. You just go on, follow the link in the description below, get it delivered to your door, life-saving medications. It's just a few simple clicks. This puppy delivers right to your door. And so that way you can be ready for the next pandemic. So be proactive, be prepared. Order your Contagion Emergency Kit today. Check it out. Get the link down below, twc.health/Robert, to get your Contagion Emergency Kit today. Promo code Robert when you check out. You'll save $30. Use code Robert. That way you can get your discount. And remember, these kits are only available in the USA and they are limited. And we appreciate our friends and our sponsors over at the Wellness Company for supporting our work here and helping us get prepared. All right. And so without any further ado, my friends, it is time to get into business on the day. And now is the time to do it. So let's get started. Election officials are now admitting that there are some pretty widespread problems out there in our 2024 election. And this is curious because just 4 years ago, they told us that there were no widespread problems. Actually, the evolution of that fake 2020 election was perfect narrative went something like this. It was like, oh, there's no fraud at all. It never happens. Okay. And they're like, oh, well, it was a little bit of fraud. Okay. Well, it was, okay, kind of a lot of fraud, but it wasn't widespread. Actually, it was widespread. So now it wasn't widespread enough to influence the outcome of the election. And then we said, yeah, it was. Look around. Tens of thousands of votes, hundreds of thousands. So it was widespread enough to impact the outcome of the election. So then they abandoned that one. And then they went forward and they said, well, no court of law found that it was consequential enough to reverse the election. You say, oh, okay. So there you go, right? So the rigged lawfare that went forward, that manipulated the election rules, that then made it impossible for Trump or the Republicans to challenge any of these things because there were already prior findings. There were already arguments about standing. It was not ripe. Okay, if they filed the election claim too soon, they said, no, you can't file it too soon. There's no evidence of fraud. It's not ripe enough. So then they said, okay. So then they file it after the election and they said, oh, sorry, you filed too late. You should have filed it early. Now latches apply and you can't recover because of your delay. And we said, what? And then other people sued and said, well, we weren't a party to any of this. And so what about us? Can we sue? No, you don't have standing either. So just eat it. And the Supreme Court snubbed their nose at a bunch of Republican attorney generals and didn't do anything about it. So, of course, it was rigged. Of course, the CIA was involved in this. CIA contractors were literally colluding with the Biden administration. Anthony Blinken, who's our now Secretary of State. It is pervasive, but they told us there was no widespread fraud anywhere. Well, turns out there is. You see here, there is widespread problems, and I will equate this to fraud. Now, the problems are going to be, you might even say structural. You might even say they're bureaucratic. And there's a good faith reason why our government is incompetent, because they're incompetent. And that's what happens when you get gigantic, disgusting bureaucracies that are in control of everything. But now it's with the mail system. And so let's go through this. Now, we know that you go to the DMV or the post office. A lot of these entities, these institutions, look at the FBI for one, have major problems, systemic problems through them. But some of these problems are not just, we can't just write them off, right? I get so tired of this excuse. Like, well, it's just a government and government just sucks. So that's why they're corrupt. We saw this with the Secret Service all the time. Well, I don't know, maybe they're just boneheads. Maybe they're just idiots. They just can't figure out to cover a roof. And so there's no ill will They're just incompetent. Okay, they get that excuse all the time, and that's pathetic. We should expect much more of our government to just say, we have some of the dumbest people in charge who are running things, and that status quo is sufficient. It's insane. So when you see things that are actually broken, you have to ask yourself if that is intentional. Did they want Trump dead? Yeah, they did. Many people did. There's videos of people saying, I wish they shot him in the head. And then we just get to use a scapegoat of incompetence and it solves everything. Same situation is happening here, right? So, we can't fix anything. That's why the border's broken. We're trying really hard in all these other places, but we just can't do it because they're so incompetent. Well, mail-in voting is one of these places where they can put their thumb on the scale and cause institutional problems, structural problems, just like we saw in the state of Arizona when we had Kari Lake running, and the day of the election, the machine stopped working for huge portions of our county. It was nuts. And it was at various locations. We went through the numbers here. We pulled it up. We showed that there was Lutheran church, 50% problems. Something Christian location, 50% problems. All of them on the outskirts of town, all of them in red areas. These are structural problems that cause a tipping of the scales. And then you put in people like Katie Hobbs, who was the Secretary of State at the time, right? And she's now also a fake referee who's just like Jocelyn Benson and Shenna Bellows and Jenna Griswold. So all of them, right, are in it as purposeful warriors to go after their political opponents. And so now we're seeing them now admit it in this document. It says, state and local election officials from across the country on Wednesday, they suddenly warned that there are problems with the nation's mail delivery system that threaten to disenfranchise voters in the upcoming presidential election. Now, telling the head of the U.S. Postal Service that it has not fixed persistent deficiencies. And there's a phrase going around that says, the point of the system is what it does. I believe that's attributable to Marc Andreessen, the billionaire. The point of the system is what it does. Okay, well, there are problems. There are deficiencies. You're going to have a difficult time collecting these ballots from rural locations. Why are these persistent deficiencies allowed to persevere? Now, in an alarming letter, the AP reports, the official said that over the past year, including the just concluded primary season, mailed ballots that were postmarked on time and were received by local election offices days after the deadline to be counted. So these votes are not being counted. They're being disenfranchised. And we know how much the left hates disenfranchising anybody. They hate it so much they don't even want you to have ID, because it's hard for certain people of certain colors to get ID, I guess. Racist. They also noted that properly addressed election mail was being returned to them as undeliverable. Oh, properly addressed election mail is coming back. Oh, they're like, oh, this is a Trump voter, undeliverable. Put that in that pile. Another one, put it over there. No, we can't deliver that. Nope, that one too, put it over. Oh, Harris, perfect. Okay, put this on, actually give this to FedEx, okay, so they can deliver it, so we make sure it gets there. A problem that could automatically send voters to inactive status through no fault of their own, potentially creating chaos when those voters show up to cast a ballot. Now, the officials also said that repeated outreach to the Postal Service to resolve these issues had failed, and that the widespread nature of the problems made it clear that these were not one-off mistakes, okay, or a problem with specific facilities. Instead, it demonstrated a pervasive lack of understanding and enforcement of Postal Service policies among employees. Now, the letter to the Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, she's perfect for the Harris administration, of Joy, Louis of Joy, wonder if this person is as hysterical as Kamala is, came from two groups that represent top election administrators in all 50 states. They told all 50 states, they said, we have not seen improvement or concerted efforts to remediate our concerns, and we implore you to take immediate and tangible corrective action to address the ongoing performance issues with the mail. Failure to do so will limit voter participation and trust in the election process. And so you ask yourself, I wonder where these problems are isolated. Where are they being located? Are they in Arizona? Are they in Georgia? Are they in Pennsylvania? Yeah, probably. The Postal Service, all 50 states, said on Wednesday, and on Wednesday they reiterated the Postmaster General's assurances She said, we're well positioned to swiftly deliver election mail despite being in the midst of a network modernization that has caused some delivery hiccups. They're admitting it. Yeah, it's weird. If it says Trump on the ballot when we scan it, something happens. It's weird. It goes right into the shredder. Mail is currently being delivered in 2.7 days. The post office is still urging voters don't procrastinate. They said, we're ready to deliver. We were successful in 2020 delivering a historic volume of mail-in ballots. Yeah, even the fake ones, too. They delivered so many of those, too. It's like, here, have some more. Also in 2022, and they're going to do it again in 2024. Oh, great. Adrian Marshall said, and we're printing them right now. The two groups, the National Association of Secretaries of State and the National Association of State Election Directors, said local election officials in nearly every state are receiving timely postmarked ballots after Election Day and outside the 3 to 5 business day that they claim is the standard for first-class mail. Now, the letter comes after 2 weeks after the postmaster said that we're ready to handle a flood of the mail-in ballots because even though Trump is continuing to sow doubts in the elections because it was rigged. Now, that year, amid the global pandemic, election officials reported sending just over 69 million ballots, a substantial increase. And both sides are talking to people to bank their votes. Now, Postal Service officials also told reporters last month that almost 98% of ballots were returned to election officials within 3 days. They like to get closer to 100%, but here it is. Officials in rural states have been critical of the Postal Service for years. Like, they'll take care of California, New York, and the blue states. But if you're in the rural areas, wow, no. They've consolidated their mail processing centers. So the rural places, which tend to be more red, not like the suburban cities or the urban cities that are very blue. In addition to being signed by the current and incoming presidents for both groups, the leaders of the groups that represent the local election officials in 25 states were listed. The election officials warned that any election mail returned to an election office as undeliverable could trigger a process outlined in federal law for maintaining an accurate list of registered voters. That means a voter could be made inactive and they got to verify their address. Now, in Kansas, he said the recent past president sent his own letter. He said nearly 1,000 ballots from his state's August 6th primary election couldn't be counted because they arrived too late. 1,000 ballots. And more are continuing to come in. So all this stuff is just sitting on some postal office worker's desk. Interesting. Weird. Almost like it's intentional. Now, Schwab posted, he said the Pony Express is more efficient at this point. So they're just not getting the ballots back, right? People put them in the mail. The post office is not delivering them. Schwab and other Kansas election officials have also said that some ballots arrive on time, but without postmarks. Okay, so then other people are just throwing, like other postal service people are probably just picking them up, which keeps them from being counted. What's more, Schwab told DeJoy, local postal clerks have told election officials that they can't add postmarks later, even if it's clear that the Postal Service handled the ballot ahead of the mail-in deadline. Oh, man, it's a problem, you know. Oh, these just don't have postmarks. Or if these do, we'll count them. We won't count them. It's really good to be the scoreboard keeper. Kansas will count ballots postmarked on or before Election Day. The Republican-controlled legislature created a grace period. In their letter, election officials also said colleagues across the U.S. have reported that Postal Service staff, from managers to mail carriers, are uninformed about the service's policies for election mail. So all the Postal Service people are like, I don't know what to do with this. There is no amount of proactive communication election officials can do to account for their inability to meet their own timelines. They need a committed partner in the Postal Service, not people who are going to, just through the commonplace government incompetence, fail to count the votes, right? This is why people have criticisms about mail-in voting, because of crap like this. Now, we made these reservations and concerns known in 2020, but they told us we were crazy. It's ridiculous. Everything got delivered. Everything got counted. No illegals voted. There's no dead people voting. Ballot rolls are perfect. And there was no manipulation of the electoral laws by guys like Marc Elias or others. There was no illegal funds that were being pumped in by guys like Mark Zuckerberg. Maybe not illegal, but basically. And then we have the censorship from the FBI. Add in the collusion with the CIA. The election was obviously rigged. And so Trump made a point to demand that there was increased security there on January 6th in 2020. They rejected him. They were out there screaming about him, saying that he was going to take over the Capitol. Remember that? We're not going to let Trump stand up National Guard here so he can seize power and all that. So then they rejected Trump's demand for the National Guard. Then the January 6th riot happened because Nancy Pelosi is a failure and didn't answer Stephen Sund's phone calls multiple times. And now they're going to secure the Capitol. Isn't that interesting? Huh. Yeah, so they're going to increase security to prevent a Capitol attack repeat. Maybe they should have done it the first time. If they would have had actual security there, wouldn't have happened. You know what else would have prevented it from happening? If the feds didn't do it. If guys like Ray Epps had actually been properly held accountable. Of course, he took a misdemeanor plea deal virtually via Zoom. Ridiculous. Got no jail time, even though he was there. Into the Capitol, the first person in that group at that overcharging of the gate. And if we didn't have the 8 confirmed federal agents that they admitted existed in the Proud Boys trial, remember there were only 5 Proud Boys, there were 8 feds, or the 50 Homeland Security officials that the defense attorneys identified in that case, well, if those people weren't out there shooting peaceful protesters in the face with anti-riot guns, blowing their cheek holes open into smithereens, maybe none of this would have happened. So now they're going to increase security. And it's almost like, if you see a label on a product, like a product liability label, it's like, don't put this in your rectum. You're like, what? It's a blow dryer. Like, how? They put the warning on there because somebody tried that thing. It's like, okay, we gotta put a warning on there. So and they're almost kind of admitting in that the product is used for that. Like the product does have a fault. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like that is here. They're saying, yeah, we kind of screwed up, right? If security was sufficient and reliable, they wouldn't have to make these changes. So there wasn't some overwhelming force there. Everybody knew who was coming. Government was on notice about who was going to be there. They made reservations. And Trump wanted to have security there. So they declined it, and then they put up the warning label. Now, suddenly, right? Now they are recognizing that they screwed up. So here you can see this is what the Washington Post has brought up for us. Feds increase security for the January 6th event to stop another Capitol attack, which they allowed to happen or instigated themselves. The federal government now, wow, shocking. I wonder, did they consult with Mayor Muriel Bowser about this? Did she reject this request? The federal government will dramatically increase security protections for the joint session of Congress. So maybe when they do not seat Trump, they can seize the lever of power. An escalation of government-wide efforts to prevent a repeat of January 6th. So they're gearing up for this again. The MAGA extremists are going to come out and steal the country again. Reality, they're going to do it. The Department of Homeland Security has designated the next electoral count scheduled for January 6, 2025. They're calling it a national special security event, giving the once routine post-election gathering the same level of security accorded to presidential inaugurations and political conventions. The Secret Service, which will take over security for the count, confirmed. So the Secret Service is capable of protecting all of them? They couldn't even protect Trump. They're going to protect the entire Capitol building. Capitol Hill Police couldn't do it. Metro Police couldn't do it. House Sergeant at Arms, Senate Sergeant at Arms, they couldn't figure it out. Now the Secret Service, who can't even put agents on roofs, is going to protect the Capitol? Okay. And the same Secret Service that deleted all the audio footage from the J13th event, the same Secret Service that deleted all of the text messages from the J6 event, yeah, they're going to be in charge. Great. National special security events are events of the highest national significance, they said. The designation, which followed a request from Muriel Bowser. Wow! So she did it this time. She learned her lesson. That's great. Muriel Bowser, welcome. Yeah, good job. Are you going to issue an apology? Are you going to respond to Donald Trump and say, hey, sorry we didn't follow your advice the last time? Are any of them going to come out with a mea culpa? No. They're just going to say, see? He's responsible for January 6th. No, you are. You're fixing the problem that you caused, and you're admitting it right now. So there's a recommendation from the fake January 6th committee, which was illegally constituted under their own House bill, Resolution 503, is intended to unlock funds and law enforcement resources. Maybe they can steal those from the DOJ slush fund like Jack Smith did, the illegal prosecutor. From across the federal government to protect members of Congress this time while they certify the election results or steal them. The very job lawmakers were doing when a mob of Trump supporters stormed the Capitol. Yeah. Also federal agents and undercover agents. But Congress, which is in the midst of a fierce battle over government funding, must make sure the Secret Service has enough money. Yeah. So they'll fund them to protect the Capitol and give them more money, even though they just failed to almost protect Trump and somebody got killed at a rally, Corey Compatore. We got DHS decision is only the latest step in an effort by people to prevent a repeat of the chaos, which they caused the last time by not securing the building and shooting people in the face. Across Washington and the country, lawmakers, aides, and other activists want a peaceful transition of power. Maybe they shouldn't steal elections then. Their fears, which they have had laid out in tabletop exercises, all right? So when you hear about the cabal of people who were sitting behind closed doors plotting to steal the election in the country, this is what it sounds like. And we already read that article from Time magazine some time ago. It's like the OJ book. It's like, if I did it, we're like, bro, what? What are you talking about? And here they're saying the same thing, that it's Trump. Well, it's actually them. They're the ones who did it, right? If we did it, they did it. Their fears they've laid out on tabletop exercises like that Time magazine article. They said how we did it, right? The cabal of people. They were kind of mocking the right about that. So they're admitting it again. Some worry that members of the House of Representatives could struggle for weeks to elect a speaker, making the certification of the election results impossible. Others are concerned that a handful of lawmakers could delay the seating of the members-elect, leaving the people elected by voters to represent their districts hamstrung, right? So the whole thing may be shut down. The people gaming out these potential scenarios acknowledge they can't possibly anticipate every possible threat to the peaceful transfer of power. Okay. The fact that Trump declined during his debate to express a single regret of his actions. He did. He expressed a regret. He expressed a regret that Nancy Pelosi failed to secure the Capitol, about his actions, right? They're so pathetic. It's not his Capitol building. It's Congress. It's their Capitol building. And he also demanded 10,000 National Guard. So the idea that he waited 3 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours, he could have waited 50 hours. It's not his responsibility. He posted a video about it. He already made his efforts. It's a separate but co-equal branch of government. It's not his responsibility. But the people, and he tried to secure the building, and they said, you're a dictator trying to take over our branch of government. They said it. But the people gaming out the post-election landscape are determined to avoid the pitfalls they experienced the last time around. Here's what Jamie Raskin said. So we are now trying to prepare for every conceivable contingency that we can think of. He's plotting to steal the election, right? That's what that means. A team under Morell, the ranking Democrat, is handling the research and the analysis behind the, quote, list of horribles, as one person said. Off the Hill, a small working group within the Protect Democracy Group, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, identifying and fighting threats to American democracy. They should be fighting the Democrats who are wrecking our free speech, our due process of law, and our equal balance of justice, our scales of justice, has been facilitating tabletop exercises to game out what might happen, right? They sit around and they ideate, right? You might do this in your companies with a whiteboard. Okay, quarter one, we're doing this. Quarter two, we're doing this. Quarter three. But they're doing the same thing. A broader group of people with congressional, political, and legal expertise initially gathered for one big meeting that dispersed into breakout sessions, where they ran through all the twists and turns of different scenarios, which means Trump wins, according to one participant, who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss confidential planning. Following that meeting, a smaller group of congressional and parliamentary experts have met on a monthly basis on a Zoom meeting to drill into the details of various post-election scenarios. This is the same thing we saw in 2020. The cabal of people that Time told us about. The meetings and group sessions are confidential, but Ian Bassin is the co-founder and the executive director of, quote, Protect Democracy. They acknowledged the work of the group in a statement to the Post. They said, the last time Congress met to count presidential electoral votes, Trump incited an insurrection on the Capitol, after which 147 members voted to thwart the will of the voters. The law has been updated, and so they're working, right? So if they have, like, they're trying to get a contingent election or something to happen where they can invoke the 14th Amendment to say they're not going to seat Trump. At the Capitol Police D Street headquarters, Thomas Manger, who took over the force 6 months after the riot, is already thinking through security. Members of Congress are not fully engaged on the planning yet. Capitol Police now has 2,200 officers, 250 more than years ago. Okay. And so they could also add unscalable fencing around. They're making intelligence a priority. And in addition to the Capitol grounds, they're also protecting Congress people. So they're bracing for it again, right? They're plotting all over the place. And Republicans, well, at least the so-called Republicans like Romney and McConnell, they're not really worried about this at all. It's like the Democrats can do whatever the hell they want. Now, Nancy Mace is a Republican congresswoman, and she's also digging into the rigged election. She wants to know more about the censorship that's coming out of the Biden White House. She sent this over to Joe and to Kamala. Dear Joe and Kamala Harris, got a question or two for you. Nancy Mace wrote to them, says, look, you two, basically it's now Harris. Joe Biden's been gone for a long time, so we have de facto incumbent President Harris. In the interest of good government, she says, and to ensure the integrity of this upcoming national election, I am writing about information about your suppression campaigns that you're currently engaged in. I want to know about it. Now, I urge you to cease and desist this activity. Stop exerting political pressure from the White House. Here's what we know. On August 26th, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook guy, posted a frank letter where he said that the Biden administration repeatedly pressured our team for months to censor certain information. They didn't even agree with it, but they did it. Previously, in 2022, Zuckerberg confirmed that Facebook's censorship also included the censorship of the laptop because the FBI was working with them on that. And they were fed information from the CIA operative, which included Mike Morrell and Anthony Blinken. Facebook, they said, should be cautious about this misinfo. Now, similarly, Twitter's decision to censor the Hunter Biden story and others were a big problem. We held a hearing on this to investigate what happened, and we noticed that the censorship of the Hunter laptop story directly impacted voting results. Talk about election interference. Talk about a conspiracy to rig an election. CIA, through their contractors, and the FBI censored the story. In 7 swing states, found that 17% of people might have switched their votes if they would have known that Hunter was dishonest and trading on his daddy's name to exploit America. 4 years on, the nation cannot afford a repeat of this. So Nancy Mace is demanding answers from the White House. Says Mr. Zuckerberg's latest disclosure arrives right in the middle of an election. Troubling revelations reveal how Facebook and Google sites responded to people looking up even the Trump assassination attempt. Remember, we went to Google to look for it? And it's like, no. Trump assassin what? No. Never happened. From the outset, your administration, Harris Biden, has advertised its willingness to manipulate the content on social media. In fact, in 2021, Jen Psaki, host of MSNBC's hit show called Inside Jen Psaki, stated at a press briefing that the administration was flagging problematic posts for Facebook to spread disinfo. Remember when she came out and told that to America? And the next day clarified that the White House was in regular contact with social media companies to censor us, you and me. Now, the White House has not even apologized for this. In fact, they're doing it. They're doubling down on it because the Supreme Court said, sure, go ahead. In contrast, House Republicans have sought to prevent political interference with social media sites. Soon after assuming the majority, the Oversight Committee held a hearing to talk about this, and we approved H.R. 140, which is Protecting Speech from Government Interference Act, which is nuts that we even need that since we have the First Amendment. The bill expressly prohibits federal employees from attempting to censor private speech, which should already be illegal, including on social media sites. The bill was approved by the full House in March 9th, 2022. in 23. And so since the Democratic useless Senate has failed to take this up, the door has remained open for further political interference from you, Joe. And therefore, we want to know the following. We want all communications with social media companies or any private sector entities about the concealment or the suppression of information on their sites from you. We want to know about all communications between your employees and social media companies with any private sector or entity. Now, send this information to us. We're going to be investigating this. We have the authority to do it because we're Congress. We have Rule 10, which says we can investigate any matter at any time. And so we'll be looking forward to your documents. That's from Nancy Mace. The likelihood that we'll get anything of those is very low. But they're keeping the pressure on the White House. And we know that this censorship is going to continue on because the Supreme Court declined to hear the censorship case, or basically enabled it throughout the remainder of the election. So it will continue on. Now, we also saw that Trump and his gag order appeal have been rejected by the New York Court of Appeals. So the censorship continues, right? Trump is not allowed to speak, which means we are not allowed to hear the truth about what's going on in New York. And as usual, MSNBC is very happy about this.
Breaking news in former President Donald Trump's legal troubles. Just in the last hour, the New York Court of Appeals rejected Trump's efforts to overturn the gag order in his hush money criminal case. Joining us now, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Lisa, good morning. What more do we know about the court's decision?
You know, Jose, sometimes when a court acts, we see an entire opinion. Other times when they reject an application, we can see as little as one word, the word rejected or denied. This is more in that latter category. All we know that the court has said is that former President Trump's application for them to hear an appeal on the gag order before his sentencing was rejected because, in the court's view, there was no substantial constitutional question directly involved. And I want to pause there on the word directly. That may be the court signaling that they understand that, for example, the entire case does present a very serious constitutional question now that the Supreme Court has ruled on presidential immunity. But as to the gag order, the New York Court of Appeals, the highest court in this state, saying there is no significant question that would justify an appeal before them at this time, Jose.
And so, Lisa,
which is ridiculous because the case is over and we're in the middle of an election and Trump has free speech. They're not even going to consider it because they don't want Trump to be able to talk about the judge's daughter, about the fact that she worked for Kamala Harris for president, literally. The fact that the judge donated 3 times to Joe Biden, one of those earmarked to stop Republicans, specifically Donald Trump. All corrupt. But they want to bury it and they don't want Trump to talk about it. So we'll continue to cover this. We'll see if there are any changes in the New York trial. But Trump's attorney, Alina, she is out speaking about a lot of this, making the case that Kamala Harris is terrible. And so if Trump can't talk about the judge, we'll talk about Kamala Harris and how bad she is and how she is the architect, along with Joe Biden and the Biden-Harris administration, of all the lawfare that's been brought against the president.
The border crisis has created 60% more rapes of women. We have 325,000 children who are lost from their families as a result of her actions. She's going to act like she's a lawyer, but as a lawyer, I can say what she's done to the city is an absolute disgrace. She can't get away from her last 3.5 years, Jesse, and that's the truth. We have the privilege of knowing what she is and can do because she's still sitting there and what President Trump did. And it's completely different. So what do you want, America? You want the last 3.5 years or you want the prior 4? I think the answer is pretty clear. So all he's got to do is just...
We want the prior 4, no doubt about that. And it was a much better country when Trump was in charge. And so hopefully the debate was able to reveal that to everybody who watched, and the right decision is made. Now, we continue on. We've got another story to talk about, and this one is a fun one. From Marc, Elias, Democrat operatives are now trying to remove other candidates from other ballots in important states. You remember this guy, Marc Elias. He was very prevalent in 2020. He runs the Elias Law Group, and he was on the outs a little bit with the DNC and the Biden administration, but he's back in the picture now with this new letter to a swing state warning them to take this candidate off the ballot or else. The candidate, as you can see, is Cornel West. They've already succeeded in rigging the ballots against RFK and against Trump now. We saw that in Michigan, the Supreme Court of Michigan, a Democratic Supreme Court, came back out and actually added RFK Jr. back to the list after the deadline has been passed, even though it's less accurate, right? So they're going to actually disenfranchise their own voters by having them vote for somebody who's not running. It's incredible. They're only doing that because they want to subtract votes from Trump. They want to leave a protest vote in there to siphon votes away from him because they're cheaters. Now, as we saw, Jocelyn Benson used obscure rules, and the Supreme Court basically made it up there and said, oh, it's allowed. There's no basis for you to demand that you get off. And so they inverted the standard and they kept RFK Jr. on the ballot, even though he's not running there. And the decision had already been made. The deadline had already been passed. In fact, the confirmation from Jocelyn Benson had already gone out to take him off. So they're going to put him back on to make a less accurate ballot because that's how big of cheaters they are. But they're trying it again. So Marc Elias is doing the same thing. You can see the Daily Caller got the exclusive on this. And it's a letter that went over to Virginia. You can see that is in this letter from the Elias Law Group. It's being sent via email to Chairman John O'Brien for Virginia's State Board of Elections. So it's a nasty gram saying, you better do something about this Cornel West fella. He shouldn't be on the ballot, and we need him to be removed because he might siphon votes off from Trump, so from Biden, from Harris. So you see, this is a situation where if it helps them, they will keep a candidate who's not running on the ballot. And if it hurts them, they will try to remove a candidate who is running from the ballot. The Democrats are cheaters. This is how they win. They've got no ideas. They're just bullies. So you can see this letter came out, and it's going over to the Board of Elections in Virginia. And they say, hey, dear members, we write on behalf of Clear Choice Action. Yeah, regarding the Department of Elections and the Board of Elections and your last minute decision to qualify Dr. Cornel West. He's on the ballot now. He's going to be on there in Virginia in November, saying you guys violated the law when you qualified Dr. West, and you must reverse your decision immediately. Take him off the ballot or else you're in trouble. Virginia law requires that each nominated elector pursuant to this article shall cast their votes, and they shall subscribe to an oath, which shall be notarized that he's in fact a citizen and legal resident of the Commonwealth. They say, see, he shall take an oath that's notarized. Now, all but one of Dr. West's electors failed to comply with this statutory requirement. And so you must submit these elector oaths. So in other words, he didn't fill out the paperwork right. Okay. So you didn't fill out the paperwork. You got to put this oath. It's got to be notarized. And your electors didn't do that. So these lawyers are looking at the paperwork. On August 27th, the department did what the statute mandates. It disqualified West from the ballot because he didn't do this. But then the department's letter was not a discretionary act. While the statute allows the department to also be furnished with other evidence, it does not authorize them to waive the oath. And so they violated the law. So accordingly, you made a mistake when you reversed your original decision to disqualify him. So you disqualified him. Then in the qualification letter, right? So they say, nope, your paperwork's bad. Sorry, you're disqualified. Then he probably submits some new paperwork and you say, oh, okay, now you fixed it. In its qualification letter, right? So once he fixed his paperwork, the department claims without further elaboration that, quote, they say that we're now satisfied that each of West's electors have affirmed their citizenship. This is crazy. So suddenly the Democrats care about citizenship? Like this is a new thing? Hold on a minute. Your electors might not be citizens of the United States. This is what they're upset about. We can't even prove they're citizens. Where's their ID? They didn't take an oath and it's not notarized. So we can't confirm that they're citizens. And so it's a citizenship problem. It's a citizenship paperwork problem. Democrats want these guys to be citizens, but not the people who are voting for them to be citizens. This is really weird. Almost like it doesn't matter what the perspective is. They just don't want people who threaten their power on the ballot because they have no values at all. But the legislature determined the department does not have the authority to do that, though. You can't say that they're satisfied. The legislature determined that elector oaths were a legal precondition, and you must do those. So you must take an oath. As noted above, the Virginia law allows the department to, quote, also be furnished, be furnished if it requests with other evidence that they're qualified. But such satisfactory evidence must be in addition to the oath. So you see. So just think about this differently, right? Like if this is Jocelyn Benson trying to get one of their candidates on the ballot, they would say, oh, no, it's totally fine. The law says you can also give other evidence, right? Like you don't need to take an oath, but you can also be furnished with other evidence. They say, no, you can't read it that way. It's not either or, it's oath plus. But that doesn't really make sense because they're saying also, right? Also be furnished. They're saying it's subsequent to. But you might say also, if that doesn't work, if you can't take an oath, just give us this other stuff. Right? And so you're mixing those words. Is it also as subsequent? Like if you take the oath, the problem with this logic is if you take the oath, why do you also need other evidence? Like the oath is, you're done. Take the oath, you're done. So you don't also need more evidence. So it's either take the oath or give us other evidence, I think. Now they say, moreover, the petition may also fail for another reason. One of his electors, Ben Black, don't know what his ethnicity is, submitted an elector oath containing a notarization date that differs from the date of the elector oath signature. So the notary date is not the same as the signature date. So his elector has to go too. The elector oath is invalid because it wasn't signed in the presence of a notary. Absent evidence to the contrary cannot be considered notarized. So another technicality. And so given that localities are scheduled to begin printing ballots and the September 20th deadline for printing absentee ballots is fast approaching, you must take immediate action. Get rid of Dr. West because he didn't take the oaths. And you must instruct all local election officials to ensure that Dr. Cornell's West name is not on the ballots. If the department refuses to take these actions, we're going to sue you. We're going to seek litigation, including an injunction and a writ of mandamus to make sure that we throw him off the ballot. And they give us some background here, right? So they say, okay, look, it's HB1. To qualify for this, you must submit your elector oath forms by noon. And he hasn't done that. Each elector oath is required to be notarized, and you got to sign it in the presence of them so they know it's you signing it. In other words, you must be signed in the presence of the notary. So one of his electors was bad, according to them. Now, the department disqualified him appropriately, and then they changed their mind. All right, so let's see. Did he rectify his paperwork? On August 7th, the department correctly determined that he failed to qualify for candidacy because all but one failed to sign the oath. The department specifically found that 12 of his electors submitted previous versions that were no longer valid. So, okay, bad paperwork. 10 days after the department disqualified him, his counsel then asked the department to reconsider, referencing the Purcell principle and arguing that because his oaths were executed prior to that date on July 1st, statutory amendment, they should be accepted, right? So that, in other words, the law changed after, and so they should be able to relate it back to the original oaths. Now, Dr. West's counsel also stated that the notarization date on the election oath is a scrivener's error, okay? So they were there together, but the person who just signed the date was wrong. They were there together. It's just a mistake. It's a typo. Now, in response, the department reversed. The department said, okay, so that makes sense. So yeah, it does relate back. We will say, it's like if you do something and then the law changes, you still get credit for doing that thing. They're like, okay, well, moving forward, yes, we'll get a new one, but we already did this, the deadlines are, so we just count that. And they said, yeah, that makes sense. So they counted it. And the other one is not a problem either. So they rectified. In other words, there was no paperwork problem. So the department reversed and they decided on September 6th, the same day, to qualify him for the ballot. Now, the department indicated that it is satisfied that they affirm their citizenship, that each is a registered voter of Virginia, and thus each is eligible to serve as an elector. And they say, sorry, no, not sufficient. You have to take a specific oath. All candidates must take the oath, and it must be a new oath. Because they passed this law, there's an effective date of July 1. And they said, well, we signed it all before July 1. And so that is, we can relate back to before that date. The law just went into effect, so let us count those. They said, yeah, that makes sense. Now, as the department recognized when they originally disqualified him, others signed the previous version of the oath. And he did not seek to qualify as a candidate until after July 1st. And so they should have executed their oaths after the date, is what they're saying. Now, he said he wasn't aware of the new forms, but regardless, it's their responsibility to do this. If he's confused, his counsel should have told him about it. Now, to the extent that he defends his noncompliance by blaming the department, that's not sufficient enough. And it is not the General Assembly. It's not like they acted in secret. They did this all publicly. And so you cannot excuse his failure. And you cannot say that it's also furnished by something else. Like he needed to take the oath specifically. While Virginia law does allow the department to also be furnished, if it requests, with satisfactory evidence that they are valid, it cannot replace the oath, right? So there's a good argument that they are in compliance with the law. They're making the argument that they're not in compliance with the law, but there's a literal subsection of the law that says, yeah, you can also give us other satisfactory evidence. And this doesn't make sense if this is necessary. Like, this is meaningless. If they take the oath, what do you need the other evidence for? So it reads to me more as an either or, not an addition. The department does not have the authority to disregard legal requirements. They're not. They're exercising this one. They've gotten other evidence that they're valid. And the notary had a good explanation. Notaries make mistakes all the time. Now, it appears that they did not sign elector oaths in the presence of a notary as well, right? So the notary is just not sufficient. That's what the Democrats do. The petition also includes 2 elector oaths containing a different notarization date. This person signed their oath on that day. This one's another date. This one's on this date. This one's another date. So a scrivener's error doesn't matter. The date of notarization is important. If that's a mistake, the whole thing's a mistake. So get it done again, and he didn't get it done again, so throw him off. And finally, the Purcell principle doesn't apply. It's derived from the Supreme Court case. Purcell stands for the principles that federal courts should not stop a state election law in a period close to an election, right? Like, let's have an election. But they say it doesn't apply to states. It is only for federal courts. The Supreme Court has said it is one thing for a state on its own to toy with election laws. If states want to meddle in their elections, they can, but the feds won't do it. So you can meddle in this and throw him off the ballot. Don't let people vote for him because he might take votes away from Kamala. The Purcell principle doesn't even apply here. And so for the reasons set forth, we urge the department to disqualify Dr. West from the ballot and instruct all localities to print ballots without his name. Signed by these 2 attorneys, Jonathan Burkon and Aria C. Branch, counsel to Clear Choice Action, as they continue to try to, in my opinion, rig the 2024 election by throwing this candidate off the ballot for technicalities. There's a good basis for him to be on it, and the board acted appropriately under the provisions of the law. But they don't want him on there because he might take away votes from their fake candidate. And the lawfare, of course, continues. But it's not just that case. There's another sleeper case out there that is being invoked to try to stop Trump and the RNC, they say, from intimidating voters and poll workers, which means it might be something that we want them to stop cheating, right? But that's now a threat. That's an intimidating action. So a nearly 4-year-old legal effort by black voters to convince a court to prevent Trump and the Republican Party from intimidating voters is coming back to life as the election emerges around the corner. This was originally brought in 2020. The lawsuit has moved slowly through the federal courts, but it's now emerging. It coincidentally has landed before Judge Tanya Chutkan. She gets another Trump case. Tanya Chutkan. Sleeper case emerges. The judge handling the federal election case brought by fake Jack Smith against Trump. But now the case is beginning to show signs of movement. The case could have enormous implications for this election. The voters are asking a federal judge to put Trump, his campaign, and the Republican National Committee under court supervision. They want to put Trump's campaign under court supervision that would require them to seek pre-approval before engaging in any activities related to recounts, certifications, or similar post-election activities. So Judge Chutkan can run Trump's campaign now and bar the defendants from intimidating voters, poll workers, or other election officials. If they prevail, their victory could provide them with a significant deterrence against political and potential intimidation and the harassment of election workers from Republicans and Trump as allies signal they're going to try to undermine the results of the election. This is really scary stuff. They're going to put the courts in charge of running the campaigns, and CNN is now spreading that we're going to undermine the results of the election. We just read an article. They're standing up an entire gamification table to try to ferret out a Trump victory. The type of supervision sought by the voters is not new to the Republican Party. The GOP had previously been under court-ordered consent decree from the 1980s that barred it from engaging in practices that could discriminate against black voters. And so the courts will run the elections. Our country is just totally fake. So at the heart of the lawsuit, black voters in Michigan say we've been disenfranchised, and they're disrupting vote counting efforts. And so they're going to take the Voting Rights Act and the Ku Klux Klan Act, and they're going to apply it to Donald Trump and MAGA. You can't question what the deep state wants to do. Chutkan is yet to make any substantial rulings in the matter. We'll see if she does. She was randomly assigned last October. She hates Trump, months after overseeing the criminal case brought by Jack Smith, who's not even a real prosecutor, not a U.S. attorney, against Trump. It's been pending for a long time, but maybe it will emerge, and maybe the courts, Judge Tanya Chutkan, can be Trump's campaign manager, and I'm sure that'll go well for him. So sick people out there. It's not even like it's a real country. It's just they want to take over everything, and they just say Judge Tanya Chutkan is sufficient to protect all of our constitutional rights. Sick times. All right, and so we've got one final story on the day, and we're going to jump into this and see what this one is, fresh out of the oven. Merrick Garland now comes to the podium to lecture Americans about our opinions on the Department of Justice. If we think that the DOJ is filled with partisan political hacks who are using the system against their political opponents, well, that might be a conspiracy theory. That might be dangerous. That might be undermining the institution, which is the point, because they've undermined themselves. We love justice here. It's one of our values, and we worked hard to get it and be a part of the justice system until we realized how disgusting it was. Now we call it out at every turn, practicing here in the court of public opinion. But the DOJ has been responsible for many corruptions and perversions of justice. You know the litany here. They're well beyond just J6 and the raids on Trump's residence or the multiple criminal prosecutions that they're orchestrating. They have corrupted the FBI to suppress news stories. They're raiding people's homes. They're arresting enemies of them and their party while they're protecting their own people who are burning down police precincts in Minneapolis. And so Garland came out today, and he is making a rare appearance where he's going to try to be above the fray, but we know this is a political speech against Trump. Let's listen to what this man has said today as he emerges. So this woman comes out and speaks, and I'm sure it's a nice talk, but now Garland comes out, and let's see what Garland has to say. Gross. Room full of prosecutors. Gross. Ugh. Sick.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dawn, for that overly generous introduction. U.S. Attorney Dawn Eisen served for nearly 20 years as a career Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Michigan. Today, she leads that office. I am grateful to her for everything that she does. And I am grateful to all the U.S. attorneys who are here with us today for your leadership and for generously agreeing to invite the entire DOJ workforce to this closing session of the 85th Annual U.S. Attorneys Conference. Since 1939, U.S. attorneys have traveled to Washington from across the country to meet with one another to discuss the most pressing issues facing their communities. Each year, the Attorney General addresses the conference. In recent years, attorneys general have delivered their remarks only to the U.S. attorneys in a small, windowless room upstairs in this building.
Yeah, now you want to bring it out in front of America.
Everyone from here in this great hall. First and foremost, to thank you, all of you, the over 115,000 public servants who make up this department. Every day in communities across the country and around the world, you do difficult and often dangerous work on behalf of the American people.
Yeah, rounding up
When a heinous crime
J6
has been
grandmas.
committed,
Yeah.
You are the ones to whom victims and survivors turn to seek justice on their behalf. You are the ones to whom the American people turn for help when a community is targeted by hate crimes, when a neighborhood is poisoned by toxic chemicals, when workers and consumers are harmed by corporate monopolies, when voters are unlawfully blocked from participating in our democratic process, when our country faces threats ranging from violent crime and drug trafficking to terrorist organizations and authoritarian regimes. You are the agents, prosecutors, correctional officers, victim service specialists.
All right, it's a
grant
big
making experts,
self-enjoyment
administrative professionals,
situation.
And so many others who step up when you are needed the most. And in the wake of horrific tragedies, you are the ones to whom communities look for protection and for solace.
And you also
Yesterday, we
make
marked the
up
23rd
fake collusion
anniversary
hoaxes.
of the September 11th terrorist attacks on our country. As we took time to remember all those who were taken from us on that day and in the years since, we honored the DOJ employees who risked their lives in responding to the attacks. They are heroes. Their service and sacrifice remind us that when the American people look to see what the Justice Department stands for, they are looking to the example of the people who work here, all of you. I know that is an enormous responsibility. So I want you to know that you have not only my gratitude, but the gratitude of every person whose life you have saved or changed through your work. You do not hear it often enough. Thank you. Thank you for being selfless public servants and patriots. Thank you for the countless hours, the nights and weekends, holidays, and time away from family that you have spent because you believe in the mission of this department and because you want to serve the American people. And thank you not only for the work you do, but for the way you do your work, with skill and integrity. That is what I want to talk about today. This workforce's ironclad commitment to the principles of fairness and impartiality that have long guided it, and why that commitment is as important today as it has ever been. 84 years ago, then Attorney General Robert Jackson delivered a now famous address to the U.S. attorneys right here in this great hall. In that speech, he sought to remind U.S. attorneys of the enormous power they hold as federal prosecutors and the responsibilities that come with that power. He defined what he deemed, quote, a good prosecutor as a person who, quote, tempers zeal with human kindness, who seeks truth and not victims, who serves the law and not factional purposes, and who approaches his task with humility, close quote. That speech, which he titled The Federal Prosecutor, outlined values that have echoed in the halls of this department.
Yeah,
and outside of
right.
it
Oh,
for
gosh.
generations. He gave voice to the principles that have guided not only prosecutors, but all of our employees who understand deeply what is at stake when it comes to the fair and impartial application of our laws.
Yeah, like Jay Bratt, Molly
His words
Gaston, and
have
Jack
inspired
Smith.
generations
What?
of public servants, including me. I first
You-
came to the Justice Department more than 40 years ago.
You are ignoring congressional subpoenas. You are ignoring the rule of law because you're a partisan.
At a time when both the leadership and the career employees of this department were working to restore public confidence in the fair and impartial application of our laws in the wake of Watergate. To do so, department leaders like Attorneys General Ed Levy, Griffin Bell, and Benjamin Civiletti developed and formalized a set of norms to guide the Justice Department's adherence to the rule of law, relying on values foundational to our democracy, in particular, the promise of equal justice under law. They put forward a set of policies to guide the Justice Department's work.
Yeah, tell
Those
that to the
included policies
BLM
designed to
protesters,
protect the
rioters who
independence
burned
of
down
Justice Department
the
from partisan
streets
influence.
versus the J6ers.
Guidelines for
Totally
FBI
different.
investigations, regulations to protect the freedom of the press, and policies to
What?
ensure respect for the
You're
department,
censoring the press.
career lawyers, agents, and staff. And they
Liar.
included a project to set out for the first time in a single authoritative source a set of principles to guide the exercise of prosecutorial discretion. In my first job at the Justice Department, working for Attorney General Civiletti, I assisted on that project. The result was a slim, paper-bound volume entitled Principles of Federal Prosecution, published in 1980.
Modified now
As
to
you well
prosecute
know, the
MAGA.
current
That's
version
it.
of the
Just
principles is
prosecute
now
Trump.
a 23,000-word electronic document enshrined in the Justice Manual. The purpose of those principles, as we wrote in the preface, was, quote, to promote the reasoned exercise of prosecutorial authority and contribute to the fair, even-handed administration of the federal criminal laws,
Right.
close quote.
Right.
Much of that document is devoted to giving guidance to prosecutors about which factors they should consider in a multitude of situations.
All right, he's telling
From
us about his
initiating
old book
prosecution,
report. That's
collecting
great.
Charges,
That they don't follow
disclosing
or care
information,
about.
entering into plea agreements and making sentencing recommendations. But the core of the principles is its directive about which factors an attorney for the government may not consider.
What?
In the words of that document, quote, the attorney for the government may not be influenced by a person's race, religion, gender, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation,
Say it.
or political association.
Yeah, political association. This is wild. So this guy came out and he's going to give us a nice little self-aggrandizing speech here. Just tooting his own horn, rubbing himself, patting himself on the back here. Great job. Let me quote you from my own document that I wrote. This is why I'm not politically prosecuting my enemies, because I wrote a document 30 years ago and I'm following that document today. You can trust me.
Or beliefs, by the attorney's own personal feelings concerning the person's associates, or the victim, or by the possible effect of the decision on the attorney's own professional or personal circumstances. This provision of the principles ends with an admonition, quote, federal prosecutors and agents may never make a decision regarding an investigation or prosecution for the purpose of affecting any election or the purpose of giving an advantage or disadvantage to any candidate or political party. In short, we must treat like cases alike.
Oh, gosh.
There is not one.
Well, why did you prosecute and raid Trump's residence over his classified documents? But Biden's classified documents, him and his attorneys were allowed to work with the White House to clean that up for a long time. There were no raids of Biden's residence. Nobody went into Hunter's crack bedroom and sniffed through his cocaine to dig that out. They went into Barron's bedroom. They went into Melania's bedroom. They didn't go into Jill's bedroom, take pictures of whatever she wears. No, they did it to Melania, okay? And they did it under the basis of Jack Smith, or the investigation continued under Jack Smith. I think the raid happened before he was involved. But ultimately, it's the same DOJ. It's the same team, okay? The FBI, the DOJ raided Trump. They didn't do anything to Joe Biden. They're going to come around and say there's, obstruction. The whole case was dismissed. Jack Smith was illegally appointed, and all of that was illegitimate.
For friends and another for foes. One rule for the powerful and another for the powerless. One rule for the rich and another for the poor. One rule for Democrats and another for Republicans.
That's what happens.
Or different rules depending on one's race or ethnicity.
That is what's happening right now, all across America. FBI is raiding people based on their politics, on who they vote for, and the other side is getting a slap on the wrist. They're getting Kamala Harris making posts supporting them getting out of custody and generating funds for bail.
To the contrary, we have only one rule.
No, you do not.
We follow the facts and apply the law
No, you
in
don't.
a way that respects the Constitution and protects civil liberties.
Right.
Over the
Civil liberties like free speech, is that why you had the FBI colluding with Facebook to bury the Hunter Biden story?
past 3.5 years, I have spoken to you often about the importance of these norms. I know that to many outside of this department, they may seem abstract or even inconsequential.
No, they seem like they're
They are
partisan.
anything but, and they must not be taken for granted. For us, adhering to these policies, principles, and norms in everything we do
You don't.
is how we fulfill the promise that is foundational to our democracy.
What a
That
lunatic.
all people will be protected equally under the law.
What a
and that all
lunatic.
people will be held accountable equally under the law.
They had cops who tapped other cops on the shoulder to move out of the way so that the January 6th protesters could walk in there. And they're treating them like insurrectionist hardcore criminals, where you had other people all over the country causing $1 billion plus of damage in the summer of love. No repercussions, no raids, no follow-up, no stupid little scoreboard counter on the DOJ website. It's a whole different operation. And now they're importing criminals too.
Our norms are a promise that we will fiercely protect the independence of this department from political interference in our criminal investigations. Our norms are a promise that we will not allow this department to be used as a political weapon.
Too late.
And our norms are a promise.
It is your political weapon.
Allow this nation to become a country where law enforcement is treated as an apparatus of politics.
It is. Listen to them. Oh, yeah. Gosh. You are literally prosecuting Trump right now with an illegitimate prosecutor called Jack Smith, who is not even lawfully appointed. He's never been a U.S. attorney. Joe Biden didn't appoint him as a U.S. attorney. He was not confirmed by the Senate. Garland knows how to appoint U.S. attorneys because he appointed Robert Hur, an actual U.S. attorney. He appointed David Weiss to investigate Hunter Biden, which was also rigged. Made him a special counsel. So he knows how to appoint U.S. attorneys as special counsels. He did not do that with Trump because it was rigged. He gave Jack Smith an illegitimate slush fund so that he could grift $20 million plus out of the American coffers to go after his political opponents. And he's going to sit in this room and lecture us about equal scales of justice while his dumb SEAL prosecutors sit there like the NPCs they are, clapping through the ceiling?
Over the course of 4 decades, during which I served in different jobs, both career and non-career.
Not a Supreme Court judge, though.
I watched as those norms became woven into the fabric of the Justice Department and were sustained by its dedicated career employees. When I came back to DOJ in 2021, after a particularly difficult period for the department, I said that my mission as Attorney General would be to reaffirm and strengthen those norms as the principles upon which the Department of Justice operates. So we took steps to better protect the department's criminal and civil law enforcement decisions and its legal judgments from partisan or other inappropriate influences. To name only a few of those steps, we reinstituted policies regulating contacts between department personnel and both the White House and Congress. We strengthened and clarified the guidelines for sensitive FBI investigations. We implemented remedial measures to ensure robust compliance with Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act.
Okay.
We updated protections for
FISA,
press
yeah,
and law
right.
enforcement investigations in order to safeguard
funny.
the essential role that a free press plays in our democracy.
You censored the Hunter Biden story via the FBI.
Prosecutorial discretion with respect to charging, pleas, and sentencing. We supplemented our state secrets privilege policy to ensure that the United States invokes that privilege only when there is genuine risk to national security. And department leadership restated and demonstrated through our actions again and again our respect for the work and integrity of the career employees who constitute the institutional backbone and historical memory of this department. Over the past 3.5 years, I have seen how the public servants of this department have continued to uphold and strengthen those norms. I have seen how you have risen to meet a range of extraordinary challenges, and I have seen the incalculable toll this work has taken on so many of you, especially those who risk their lives every day. I am thinking of heroes like Tommy Weeks, the Deputy U.S. Marshal who was killed while apprehending a fugitive earlier this spring. And I am thinking of heroes like Tommy's family who have made the kind of sacrifice that no one should ever have to make. In addition to seeing how you have operated in the face of dangers like violent crime and terrorism, I have also seen how you have bravely carried on in the face of an unprecedented spike in threats targeting a range of public officials across the country. Over the past 3.5 years, there has been an escalation of attacks on the Justice Department's career lawyers, agents, and other personnel that go far beyond scrutiny, criticism, and legitimate and necessary oversight of our work.
Are you prosecuting
These
them?
attacks have come in the form of conspiracy theories.
Are you prosecuting them? Like if they're actual threats, that's already illegal. You can't threaten and harass public officials. They take it very seriously. They'll put you in prison for that. So what is he talking about? We're allowed to have conspiracy theories. We're allowed to talk about things. In fact, many of the things that we've been dinged for being called conspiracy theorists have all been proven true. And so we're allowed to talk about this stuff, aren't we?
Dangerous falsehoods, efforts to bully and intimidate career public servants by repeatedly and publicly singling them out, and threats of actual violence.
Okay, those are illegal. Those are illegal. The other things are free speech. Threats of actual violence, that's already illegal. You're the DOJ. Go prosecute them. Now, the other stuff, are we not allowed to talk about Jack Smith and the fact that he's a partisan hack and he is brought in here to be a hatchet man against Trump? Can we not talk about that? Can we not talk about Jay Bratt from Florida and all his malfeasance, okay, his disgusting behavior when he was trying to basically threaten Thomas Woodward, the defense attorney for Walt Nauta, saying your client better testify against Trump or maybe you're not going to get that judgeship position. Can we not talk about that? Can we not comment on the fact that DOJ is bringing in 8 to 12 million pages of documents trying to bring a case to trial within 9 months in the J6 case? Rigged, all rigged, because it's orchestrated by Joe Biden and Merrick Garland. Can we not talk about the fact that Garland prosecuted Trump after Joe Biden complained to him about it, went and launched the investigations, then appointed a special counsel? Or how about the fact that Fani Willis and Alvin Bragg's office, Matthew Colangelo, came over from the DOJ, from Garland's office to go prosecute Trump in New York? Or that Fani Willis was hanging out with Kamala Harris at the White House? All of it is weaponized against Trump.
You have made clear that the Justice Department will not be intimidated by these attacks. But it is dangerous and outrageous that you have to endure them. It is dangerous to target and intimidate individual employees of this department solely for doing their jobs. And it is outrageous.
We're allowed to criticize our government. That's the whole point of the First Amendment. And if your employees are doing crap jobs, we're allowed to talk about it. You're not immune from this just because you want to cry about your employees or something like that. Rest in peace to that man, right? We don't want anybody dying or any of those things. But this is Garland explaining that they do no wrong. They're beyond criticism because he wrote some stupid paper 30 years ago.
That you have to face these unfounded attacks because you are doing
They're not
what is
unfounded.
right
That's
and
the point.
upholding the rule of law.
They're legitimate.
You deserve better. You deserve gratitude.
We deserve better. The American people
work
deserve better than a room full of SEAL prosecutors who don't know the difference between real and legitimate and fake prosecutions.
You deserve to be honored. The work you
No.
do every day
No.
makes a difference.
No.
And the way you do that work makes clear that the public servants of the Department of Justice do not bend to politics and that they will not break under pressure.
They're going to continue their weaponized institution, and they're thrilled about it.
The choices you make in every investigation, in every filing, in every trial, in everything you do to ensure the fair and impartial application of the law make this department and our democracy worthy of the public we serve. And for that, you deserve respect.
No, we need a whole
As I
new
hope you know,
DOJ. You guys are a
you have
sham.
mine, wholehearted. You also have my promise that nothing will ever stop me from defending this department. And defending the extraordinary people who work here. I came back to DOJ as Attorney General believing that our norms are some of the most powerful tools we have to ensure our adherence to the rule of law.
Democratic norms.
Having now served as Attorney General for
the
past 2.5
Democratic
years,
Party.
I continue to believe deeply that our norms matter now more than ever to our department and to our democracy. I also believe now more than ever that the most important resources the Justice Department has are the dedication and integrity of the people who work here. As we wrote in the preface to the first
They don't have
edition
it.
of Principles of Federal Prosecution, quote, important though these principles are,
He's quoting
the
himself
proper
again.
operation of our federal
Great.
prosecutorial system. The success of that system must rely ultimately on the character, integrity, sensitivity, and competence of those men and women who are selected to represent the public interest in
Who?
federal criminal justice
Jay
process.
Bratt?
It is with
Molly
their effort
Gaston?
that the purposes of these principles will be
Jack
achieved.
Smith?
Close quote.
He quoted
I know
himself.
that many of you
Great.
have heard me talk about why the work of the Justice Department is so important to me personally. I've often shared that I wanted to give back to the country and to the system of laws that took my grandparents in and protected them.
Oh,
when They had
gosh.
nowhere else to go.
Someone get him some Kleenex.
That protection is what distinguishes America from so many other countries. The protection of law,
We don't.
the rule of law.
What are you talking
Foundation
about? What rule of law? Okay, the DOJ is guiding the president through their civil divisions and all sorts of other things to appeal the rule of law. The Supreme Court says you can't come out here and just do whatever you want with student loans. You have to pass some statutes through Congress. That's how our country works. They don't care. They just appeal it anyways. Constantly flouting the rule of law to do whatever the hell they want. There were laws at the border. They just ignored all of those. There are laws in place that they selectively enforce to give themselves the benefit of the doubt.
System of government. Our democracy relies on an independent law enforcement agency, the Department of Justice, to ensure those protections.
It's not independent. It's under the executive branch. You work for Joe Biden. It's not some third independent branch of government. It's part of the executive.
And critically, our democracy depends on people who dedicate themselves and their careers to ensuring those protections. People like all of you. Protecting the rule of law is the obligation of every generation of public servants at the United States Department of Justice. In this time and place, that responsibility is yours and it is mine. I know we are up to it. I am grateful to each of you for your commitment to this department, to the norms that sustain it, and to the people we all serve. Thank you.
Oh, gosh. So this was a disgusting love fest between these government prosecutors and Merrick Garland at the DOJ. Evidently, normally that is there anybody we can recognize here? I wonder if there's anybody who stands out. But normally, apparently, they do that behind closed doors. But he had to come out and make a political statement. And all these prosecutors just really thrilled to see him. Wow, he's amazing. Yes, 234 years of historical precedent shattered. He rated our political opponents. Here, let's take some pictures. He's going to stand there a little awkwardly. Maybe somebody else is going to come talk, shake some hands. All right. So hopefully he goes, wipes his eyes from his very emotional speech. But that was our Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who is now lecturing us about the fact that we can't criticize the DOJ. They do everything right. He wrote a guidebook 30 years ago, and they're still following that. And so you can rest assured, America, your justice system is fair and independent. They're working hard for you, and they're not going to stop until justice is delivered across our country. All right, let's hear from you, my friends. It has been a heck of a stream. We covered some good ground today. If you're just joining us, we had a couple stories that we went through this morning. We talked about widespread election problems emanating from the post office and elsewhere, some structural, institutional problems that they're now admitting exist. We also talked about the new lawsuit threats that are happening in Virginia. Marc Elias from Democracy Docket is back, and he's now saying, if you don't remove Cornel West from the ballot, we're going to sue you. We're going to be in litigation because, in my opinion, they're cheaters. And so check that one out. And then, of course, we just went through that Merrick Garland conversation, which was less interesting than we even anticipated. But now, my friends, let's hear from you. Let's see what you say about this. It's a beautiful Thursday. Hope your week is unfolding so beautifully and so nicely. We got some great comments in the house, and I see Voice of the People is here. Voice of the People, I just had a sniff there. Voice of the People says, why we won't get up to here's Voice of the People. Let me pull this up on screen. It says, we won't get up to date info because of hacking. U.S. Postal Service is saying that they expect problems. 2020 will come back. This time, they will find the fraud they commit in favor of Trump to remove him from office. We won't get up to date. Well, I feel like it's a structural problem as well. So they'll just call it results. Like it's not going to be up to date. It's just going to be the results. And then the results won't include maybe the tens of thousands of ballots that never made it in because the Postal Service was just throwing them out the window as he was driving down. Who knows? What's up, Voice of the People? Good to see you, brother. We got Oni is here. What's up, Oni? Bringing in, been a membo for 2 months with a nice Trump emoji. Good to see you, Oni, in the house. Oni's also gifting 5 membos. Thank you, Oni, for doing that. And welcome aboard, new friends, 5 new friends. Great to see you. Welcome aboard. Elf, what's up? Elf is bringing in 10 membos. Elf, thanks for doing that one. 10 new membos coming in, courtesy of ELF in the house with that kitty. Does not want to be eaten. What's up, King Ginger? Says Garland stinkies in a wine glass, and he whiffs it. And he says, that's good. Smells like burning peasants in Minneapolis. Hey, what's up, Stacy Milligan? Hey, thank you, Stacy. Hey, Rob, thanks again for a great show. Also, does anyone else have the urge to toss tea into a harbor lately? We are living in an alternate universe. Today was a wild one. Today was a pretty scary stream. We're playing with with a possibility of Tanya Chutkin, the judge, getting control over Trump's campaign, and she is the judge in charge of that decision, I guess, in America. Thank you, Stacy. Hey, Stan Cottrell says, eventually civil disobedience might be the only option that President Trump has to fight these weaponized courts and judges. Well, we always, of course, follow the law here and encourage everybody to follow the law. But you might see some peaceful protests emerge, no doubt about that. And a situation where, maybe like the truckers or something that's sort of pseudo-legal, like it's legal and then they make it illegal, and like the truckers in Ottawa, which was an amazing situation. King Ginger, what's up? Good to see you on that one from Garland's Wine Glass. And Stan Cottrell says, defy and ignore 2024. Defy and ignore 2024. Good to see you, Stan. And this one from Linda Hunter says, this is the great pre-bonkering psyops of 2024. The great pre-bonkering psyops of 2024. We're living through it. And it's pretty interesting to watch Garland get up there and get all emotional as he's wrecking the country. It reminds me of that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you read that book, the first chapter of the book says, never criticize, condemn, or complain. Like, just never do it. Don't ever, in your personal life. Obviously, this is politics. Like, we're criticizing pretty hard here. But the point of the story is he tells a story about a mob boss, and the mob boss is like, this criminal mafia gangpin, kinkster guy, whatever. And they ask him when he's in jail, like, why, like, do you regret anything? He's like, regret? I'm just doing the best I can, right? I'm just doing the best I can. So I wonder, like, is Garland that disillusioned? Kind of like a, criminal mobster kind of a thing? He just doesn't recognize the difference. He just thinks he's doing the right thing. Is he that deluded? Does he know what's happening? Is he like Joe Biden? It is the Biden administration after all. Is this capacity problem spread there too? Who knows? All right. So thank you, my YouTube friends, for sending that one in, for sending those great comments in and those great donos in. Let's say hello to some friends on locals. Then we are going to go over to locals to debrief for our members only after party. Hey, what's up? Eddie Block is in the house. Eddie Block. Good to see you, Eddie. Eddie just shared this one. Eddie Block is hosting a video tonight over on this link. Says, Jennifer will be a guest tonight on my show, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Eddie Block Films. Check out the link and let's support our friend Eddie and Jennifer. It sounds like it's going to be a great show. 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern will be a good one. Chubby says, oh, there's a presidential election this year? Oh, I know. Let's completely revamp and update our mail-in balloting system. Perfect time to do it. Perfect time. Hey, it's travel agent Amy. What's up? Says, I sure hope all this isn't too little too late. All this stuff coming out is promising, but I'm still not confident it will be enough for a fairish election. Yeah, those concerns are valid, travel agent Amy. And when you have Shenna Bellows, Jocelyn Benson, and Jenna Griswold, those three women who all kind of have those same crazy eyes, and they're the ones in charge of counting the votes, it's a scary prognostication. Sword Magic Helmet says, with all that you have covered here today, how do we possibly get a fair and impartial result in this election? I actually think it is more of what we're doing. It's talking about it. It's drawing attention to it. It's making sure people are aware of it so that they're animated and agitated to go to the polls. And I am hopeful also that there are, poll watchers, that we have our friends, especially many of our amazing senior citizens out there, poll watching the hell out of this election. Like that infrastructure, that apparatus needs to come out of the woodwork. But that's probably the best and most direct solution is to keep the energy up, keep your friends engaged. Like I was having a conversation with a woman yesterday, and she's awesome. And she was a very big Kennedy fan. Okay. Huge Kennedy fan. And the election came up and she's like, man, I was just a huge Kennedy fan. And I said, I know. Well, you know where Kennedy's going now, don't you? She's like, I know. And she's like, well, she's like, I can't really. She was a Trump hesitant person. But we had a short conversation. I said, hey, Kennedy's on board. He's putting his heart and soul behind this. So give it a thought, right? Give it a thought. let's see, come on board with us. Like, this is it. Like, we need you. Right? So it's like more of those conversations, and it's just slow whittling away. So I don't know if that woman's going to vote for Trump or not, but I hope so. And I hope that these conversations continue, and it's literally too big to rig, and we have enough eyes on it to keep sense of it. But we also are shining a spotlight. Like, it's not just a thing that we do. It's attention, it's energy, it's sunlight is the best exposure. It's that principle of transparency to expose it out, which is why I'm so grateful when you share this with somebody, with our content with somebody who hasn't seen it, so that hopefully they understand the truth of what's happening and they get energized and engaged. 51K, what's up, 51K? Says, I heard somewhere recently that they currently are Trump-proofing the DOJ with some new hiring policy, basically making it impossible for him to gut the DOJ. Have you heard anything about it? No, but I don't think that is really going to have any teeth to it. The president would be the head of the DOJ. And I think you're right. They might create some contracts or something. So you might have a difficulty firing people because the government already gave out benefits and you can't withdraw a benefit that's already been given, type of a thing. But no, I haven't heard any specifics about it. But thank you for that, 51K. Crash says, Rob, I love words. Words have meaning. They convey those meanings succinctly without unnecessary gun flapping. When I see and hear Garland, I see him as the titular head of the DOJ, holding or constituting a purely formal position or title without any real authority. Someone is running the show, but it ain't Garland. He's a titular head, period. Yeah, and I agree. I think it's probably Lisa Monaco and some other interests that are running it. But Garland, I think he thinks he's like Joe Biden. Like Joe Biden comes out, he's like, we beat Big Pharma. And everybody's like, what? You mean you beat their earnings into them or something? Like you beat their stock price into the clouds or what? So when Garland comes out and he's like, we're protecting and preserving equal protection of the law, everybody goes, even the people in the crowd were like, yeah. They're like, what cases are you working on? Trump cases. How about you? Trump cases. Yeah, Trump cases. Okay. Cliff Norman says, I can't stand Mitch McConnell, but owe him a great debt of gratitude for keeping his anti-rights Garland off the Supreme Court. The movie Judgment Nuremberg with Spencer Tracy was all about trying judges and prosecutors like Garland and Smith that made Hitler possible. Wow, from Cliff Norman. Sounds like a good recommendation, an interesting one. Thanks, Cliff, for that one. And for those great donos and comments over on the locals. You guys rock. And of course, we are going to go over there and hang out for a little bit longer before we call it a day and wrap it up. But before we do that, let's say hello to our friends on X. Is anybody over there joining us today? Couple comments. We've got James Pepper. What's up? Brad Becker's in the house. I think Rumble's working. Hopefully Rumbles is working. Hey, Pete Za is in the house. And Based Eagle says, Democrats raided Trump's home, tried to take him from the ballot, indicted him with fake charges, forced him into court, tried to bankrupt him, tried to assassinate him, says Democrats are the real threat to democracy. Good comment from Based Eagle in the house. And so, my friends, it has been a heck of a stream. Biology Always Wins says, I am so frustrated with everything. I have so many people say that they are all for a new Tea Party for America. Sadly, I think I agree. The government is way too big. People making decisions for the U.S. that were never elected. Yeah, it's a giant bureaucratic administrative state. And it doesn't serve we the people. Crash says, thank you, Mitch. He kept the titular one from ascending to the Supreme Court. From Crash to contrary, no doubt about it. That's some good news too. Okay, and so my friends, it has been a heck of a stream. Thanks for joining us a bit early on the day. We're excited to go through this stuff with you. We are going to come back tomorrow, probably be an earlier show again. So thanks for subscribing. Thanks for keeping that notification bell on so that we don't miss you when we're back here tomorrow. We're going to have a great stream no matter what happens. I'm sure there will be some more election fallout, election debate fallout, more updates. And so it's going to be a beautiful Friday when we're back here to get into it. But in order to do that properly, we're going to need to see you right back here so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends, and a great evening. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.